people charging $100 for games, man.
Okay, let's talk about the $100 elephant in the room, because the internet is wrestling with a rumor that feels rather shocking, that Grand Theft Auto 6 may launch with a $100 RRP price tag, right? That's the box price of the game. And your gut reaction is probably the same as mine. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's too much. And that is fair. But this story actually goes a bit deeper than just the sticker shock, because we've actually been here before. Back in 2023, there were unsubstantiated rumors that had people worried about a $150 price point for GTA 6. Now, that did obviously not materialize. But this time it's based on an analyst sharing his TLDR of private discussions that he says are actually happening amongst people in the AAA sector. $150 was obviously absurd.
Well, they're trying to figure out a way to get people to pay more money for games, because basically the price for video games hasn't really changed in the last 15 years, but inflation has. So the problem is that as video games have become more expensive to make, they can't increase the price of the games, which is one of the reasons why they add in microtransactions. And also, like, there have been elements of gaming, like, for example, distribution that's cheaper now. But you also have Steam, for example. So instead of spending 30% of your money on, like, packaging and sending it to GameStop, now you're spending 30% of your money on Steam.
$100, well, that's not really as absurd, especially coming from Take-Two Interactive. So the anxiety that people have is not a baseless thing, and again, that is Take-Two's fault, but not just what they're known for recently, like, say, Grand Theft Auto 5 not having narrative DLC because it doesn't pay in comparison to Shark Cards, the Zynga acquisition, horrible sports game monetization, and all of that stuff. No, it's because Take-Two are the very company who led the charge on the increase from $60 to $70 as the AAA standard. But here's where it gets more complicated. You and I may be adamantly opposed to paying $100, but many people obviously are not, because
I think people will pay $100 for GTA 6. I do. And I know people might not want to hear me say that, because you're thinking to yourself, oh, well, you know, that means that, like, oh, don't say that because then they'll do it. I'm just simply talking about what my observation and prediction is. I think that people will absolutely spend $100 for it. And I think that people would have spent $100 for Baldur's Gate 3 or for Elden Ring. I do.
Because deluxe edition, season passes, premium bundles, all of those things. We also all know the AAA budgets are kind of ballooning, and it's not just the big evil corpo types that are saying this. This is a pretty glib tweet that came from Larian's publishing director. Obviously, he's poking the thing with a stick, but he did tweet, "You're not supposed to say this out loud."
Yeah.
The point is, actually, this is kind of what they're all thinking. So let's get into the story.
Of course they are.
What kicks it off is this.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the problem. Like, inflation affects every industry. It's not anything specific to this, oh, wow, video games are somehow unique. No, this is how it is with everything.
Matthew Ball's State of Gaming 2025 report, and it suggests that some players in the industry are quietly hoping for Rockstar to break the $70 ceiling.
Yeah.
Of course, not just for themselves, but to trigger an industry-wide price reset, basically pushing $50 up to $60, $60 to $70, all the way up the chain. And this is obviously not just analyst speculation. Whenever Larian's publishing director effectively, you know, confirmed it with a cheeky, "You're not supposed to say that out loud," he was really just reiterating a point that he also made last August when he talked
Almost
about...
all games should cost more to base load because of cost of making them. Inflation, for one, is outpacing pricing trends, but I don't think we'll get there with DLC promises so much as quality communication. Everyone's just waiting on GTA 6 to do it. Yeah, I feel like this is a common sense perspective to have. I mean, the problem is that gamers aren't really willing to spend more money. That's the issue.
Rising development costs and inflation as well. But of course, he gets to say that from the position of selling people Baldur's Gate 3. That's a game with such an absurd value proposition that it still has 24-hour peaks of 75k on Steam.
It's insane.
I mean, if you were to pay $100 for Baldur's Gate 3, but you're still playing it a year and a half on, that's certainly more value than most AAAs are giving you. But it's not just him. This point is cropping up everywhere. As an example, Capcom's president just recently at Tokyo Game Show talked about development costs exploding, quote, 100 times higher since the Famicom days. Now, obviously, this was not him saying,
a long time ago.
Games cost $50 in the Famicom. Okay, we need to
Famicom is the, if I believe, the regular NES. So that was the one that had like Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3 on it. Duck Hunt, stuff like that. It's
Charge
the
people
Japanese version.
$5,000 for
Yeah.
games. No, he's not saying that because games sell so many more copies now, but there is a point there that he's making, and it's rather funny considering one of the older rumors, because paying $50 for a game in 1985 is the equivalent of $145.70
Wow.
in today's money, which, funnily enough, is near that original GTA rumor and is not so far away from some digital collector's editions. To take it to Grand Theft Auto, then, it's going to be one of the most expensive games ever made. It will be absurdly huge. Some people will say that that justifies a price hike, that this is basically Rockstar's excuse to nudge everything up by $10 for the whole industry. But Grand Theft Auto is not your typical game. Rockstar is operating in a completely different universe. Their shark card revenue is so substantial that another analyst, Daniel Ahmad, suggests that actually they could lower the price point of GTA 6 just for the sake of building up the GTA Online player base to sell more shark cards. The point
Is
basically
it that
is
big?
they're in that
That's
rare
crazy.
tier along with Call of Duty where they can
God.
spend $700 million in a game and be completely justified. We actually covered it in this video a little bit ago. Now, no one seriously thinks that Grand Theft Auto needs to be $100 a pop to be financially viable. But what we all do, I think, trust is Take-Two's desire for more money. Because obviously...
Yeah, of course they're going to try to make more money. And I think also, like, every single year that the prices of video games don't go up, it becomes probably harder to achieve the same thing with video games. But I think the issue is that, like, number one, audiences don't care about the struggles of the producers. They just simply want to buy the content and play the game. That's number one. And number two, I think that a lot of people have the perspective that a lot of these big video games, the reason why they have these massive budgets are because of things like water physics, things like motion capture for like a person's facial movements, things like this that, you know, maybe this stuff kind of matters a little bit, but it's ultimately not going to be why you play a video game. And I think that's a huge issue that people have too, is the focus on like superficial content rather than the actual gameplay experience.
They want that. And the industry's desire for Take-Two to be the thin end of the wedge, for them to take the hit so everybody else can charge $80 without having a PR shitstorm. And that's a justified worry because it happened before. You know, it really is remarkable how quickly the $70 price point solidified, and when that happened, Take-Two led the charge. Then PlayStation's first-party titles followed suit, and the strategy was pretty damn simple. They used next-gen consoles as their cover for the increase, and
of course,
Nintendo eventually joined in. They leveraged as well Tears of the Kingdom's massive hype to push their own prices up. But actually, here's where it gets kind of interesting. Not everybody could even make that work. Take Redfall, right? It completely face-planted at $70. Let's be real, it would have face-planted at just about anything else. But I bring it up because when analysts started to notice quick discounts on $70 games, they questioned Strauss Zelnick. Strauss is, by the way, the CEO of Take-Two. He's quite the fellow, sort of vampire daddy energy. Anyway, his response was rather telling. He said, "We're not seeing pushback." Now, the emphasis on we're is on our half, or our behalf, right? So it's not like he said, well, we aren't seeing a pushback, but literally he did say, we're not seeing a pushback. And I think there's a big point there. The reality is that
I think the value proposition is what matters more than the game's price. And I think that's the big issue. I don't think people have a bad issue paying even $70 for a video game. Now, you're going to have some people say that they do, and I think that to a degree that that's probably true. But I think that the amount of people that actually decide to make a purchase decision based on that difference between $60 and $70 is probably smaller than the profit difference between $60 and $70. So it would logically be better to sell the games at $70, right? If you look at it purely from a numerical perspective. Do you think most will pay $100? I think that they will. Yeah, I think that obviously people say that they won't do something, but when a game gets popular and a lot of people want to play it, I think that you'll see people just do it anyway. At first, they might not do it. Yeah, FOMO. FOMO goes so hard. And I think that there's also a lot of examples of that happening too with other products as well. It's not like this is some kind of unique situation.
Publishers like Take-Two, like Capcom, PlayStation, they can command those prices because of their track record and game quality. I mean, Monster Hunter Wilds, that's going to share the same RRP as Redfall, which is a bit ridiculous when you think about them. Actually, this has gotten to the point where Saber Interactive's CEO, when talking about Space Marine 2, said that they actually felt they had to price their game at $70 because they feared that players would see anything lower as a red flag for quality.
This is true. It's a psychological effect that some people have, and it's observed specifically with store brands versus name brands. But I don't think that it's really true inside of video games. I don't, but this is, I'm just letting people know it's anchoring. Yeah, well, it's like reverse price anchoring. So, yeah, not for many.
His point actually does make sense for consumer psychology. In a world where an audience expects $70, if you publish your game at $60...
This is why I never eat chicken nuggets at Burger King. 10 nuggets for $2? Yes, sure.
Will then assume that that's you admitting that you're actually not able to command what the industry now sees as a full price. Right? So it is basic sales psychology here. Now, yes, in a world where every customer is a fully informed, dispassionate, rational actor, well, I think the entire global economy would look rather different.
Yeah,
the reality is we're humans, we're emotional, we're not always rational, and we are prone to fun psychological biases. So in a world with a $70 standard, if one game is 60, people will begin to think, why is it 60? There must be a reason why it's not the default. That deviation, well, that adds in some ambiguity, and that means you're less likely to make the sale. And the upshots are fascinating. Capcom are going to make more money than ever with the new Monster Hunter, but we are seeing these discounts being piled on faster than ever. But a 20% discount on a $70 game.
Well, the thing is that you capitalize immediately on all the FOMO Andes, right? Because like if they made Monster Hunter like expensive, that you'd still have people doing that now. It's either $70 or free to play. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and I get that. It's just that now I think that you're going to see games that are going to be going from $70. I think we'll see whenever we're old, keep in mind, this is something that we can all guarantee. We will look back at the days where video games were only $100 and be like, man, those were the days. That's just inevitable. It's fucking inevitable that's going to happen.
Is actually more revenue than a 20% discount on a $60 game, but it still has the psychological benefits of a 20% discount. So it still works, and this serves to defend everybody's margin within the industry, which certainly goes back to Matthew Ball's point about the whole industry wanting a $10 increase to cascade up. But actually, there's something we've missed. We're already well past $70. It's time to enter the big thing to mention. So, do you value something objectively, right, based on its input costs plus some margin? Or do you think something is valued based on what someone in the real market is willing to pay for it?
Everything is worth what somebody's willing to pay. That's the only thing that matters. It doesn't matter. Anything else is irrelevant. It's noise. You can get people to spend a bunch of money on stupid shit, and some people won't spend a little bit of money on something that's extremely important. Think about, for example, like the little things that you can buy with car insurance that, you know, like, for example, like medical liability and how cheap that is and how much that insures you for. That's just an example. Life insurance is another example. You know, buying nicer clothes is an example. Many, many things.
I'd say that at the very least for things that we experience like art, it's the latter, right? That's why millions of people buy games above that $69.99 RRP. The $100 price tag that kicked off this whole discussion has already happened. It just has happened indirectly because
with deluxe
see that
editions.
$10 price rise from $60 to $70. Well, $69.99 of today's dollars is in fact worth $57.75 in 2020.
Isn't that scary? In 5 years, it's gone down by that much. That's terrifying.
Yeah, inflation's a bitch. That's why Space Marine 2 had masses of people paying $30 extra to have some cosmetics, and I think most importantly, advanced access. Just about every...
This is the reason why companies do it. And I know that people are like very critical of companies doing early access for games, But if I was releasing a game, I would do early access. I would, because I would feel like it's so easy to make extra money, and it's something that doesn't hurt the game.
Every major game these days does advanced access. Obviously, it's more money, because with it, publishers have found their workaround. They know that people who buy a game on day one are price insensitive compared to the average customer, because they're the people who still buy games on day one with full knowledge that deep discounts still do happen in the industry.
Exactly.
And that means that they are the very people who you can laser target with premium advanced access. And in a way, we know part of the reason why. Budgets are indeed exploding. Spider-Man 1 was said to cost like $100 million. Its sequel, that came out just 5 years later, cost $315 million. Which, by the way, you can't just put down to inflation.
300? It tripled? That's crazy.
It's also an industry-wide trend that I'll be diving into soon in the channel.
Oh my God.
For now, I want you to check this out. This is from Matthew's report, and it's the RRP of Grand Theft Auto games from 1997, and it shows nominal price and inflation-adjusted price.
Yeah, there it is.
It's kind of funny because Grand Theft Auto 1 would cost $100 in today's money. It actually, it almost fits the story too well.
Video games used to be pretty expensive back in the day. I remember my mom in like the 90s and like early 2000s, $50 for a game? What the hell? It better be good.
If you look at this graph, you see that it
was a
actually
lot.
does not tell the full story, not even close, because it would be disingenuous to look at that and think, oh, Strauss Zelnick and the lovely people at Take-Two Interactive have protected me against inflation by not hiking their prices even more. That is obviously not the case, because that's not their business model. To just take that chart would be to omit shark cards and everything else that goes on. Because the move from 60 to 70 was not enough. It was just part of a whole stack of measures to increase revenue per customer without going so hard that it sparks deep outrage. But here's the thing.
Well, this is what they do with microtransactions. This is the real reason why we have so many fucking microtransactions. It's because of shit like this.
Distortion will hurt them. And within Matthew's report is a rather shocking thing about consumer spending. By now, I think most of us agree that a $100 RRP largely wouldn't work because customers would just reject it and wouldn't see it as a good value. And that's because...
I disagree. I think that people would buy it. I really do. I think they would buy it.
Because the large upfront purchase is the more psychologically expensive way to get some money. That's why you've got the upcharges and the microtransactions growing over time. Those are just little cuts here and there. So not only is this, you know, for all of the reasons that we know, but there's a deeper hidden sort of reason and risk here. And it's one we're about to face. Imagine Grand Theft Auto 6 ends up costing $80.
Yeah.
Now compare that to, say, some skin bundles. It's the cost of a few skins for a Grand Theft Auto. Now, for Grand Theft Auto, Daniel Ahmad is right. The RRP tweaks that Take-Two can make will pale in comparison to shark cards over the life of that game. And that brings me to the big risk here, our perception of value. Because when you can buy a game that costs over $500 million to make for the price of a few skins in some other game, what does that say about value? What are we paying for? Are we even paying for content now? And here's the data to ram that home. This is worldwide consumer spending in real terms. That's the killer, in real terms. And what we see is that even with games as money terms,
Oh, I bet that gray is a fucking microtransaction shit. That's probably why it's going up some. No, because it was in 95. That doesn't make sense. Oh, it's gone up massively. That's a lot.
That's the killer in real terms. And what we see is that even with games as money desperate as they seem to be in many cases, the spending is shockingly flat. RRP matters less. But if you look at all of the money that's being spent, well, it's not massively growing, and what you basically realize is the money being spent is going less and less into content. and more into upcharges and
battle passes,
microtransactions.
shit like that, yeah.
It seems that, again, in real terms, everybody is fighting for a roughly similar number of dollars, your dollars, and that pool of dollars doesn't seem to be going up as quickly as game budgets are, which means that, well, on balance, more of those dollars are going into what I would call low-value upcharges like skins and not game content, which is a problem if you're here for actual video games.
Tons of people buy skins, and you make way more money on those skins, because think about like what your profit margins are. So like if you're at like a 10 or 20% profit margin on selling a video game, imagine what you're at with a skin. You're probably thinking 80-90% profit margin on that.
Back to Larry. Baldur's Gate 3 is not full of upcharges
like a low
and
estimate.
Bullshit. The $70 games that it competes against, though, often are full of that bullshit. And of course, those are, the big traditional AAA publisher titles that set expectations industry-wide. $70 works for them, right? Those big AAAs, because they can monetize in so many other ways with your advanced access, all of your different bundles and your currencies and all of that stuff. But if you're fighting those companies to make a AAA quality game, like say Larian would be doing, and you're targeting $70, but you're foregoing all of the other ways that those companies earn money on top of the $70, then you are at a disadvantage for not taking up those tactics, and that's bad.
That's why every single video game is adding in battle passes and the same types of functionalities, because they've basically figured out algorithmically what the best way of getting money out of people is. That's why every single video game plays the exact same.
Of games like Space Marine 2 feel the need to do the very expensive premium advanced access. And that's the real point here. The unit economics, the business models, those shape what sorts of games get made. And that matters if you care about games as an art form. I mean, that's why Grand Theft Auto 5 did not have narrative DLC. And looking around the industry, it's probably why we've seen a string of AAA single-player narrative studios die. It's why back in the day, we would actually get plenty of narrative DLCs for games, but nowadays, that just doesn't really seem to be the thing that happens anymore.
Well, you get Elden Ring or something like that, but it's infrequent.
Untold millions for the chance to sell a new creative $70 game, or just pumping out more $15 to $25 skins to sell to the people you already know you have in the game you've already made. So
and also, like, skins sell themselves, because you have, like, Chinese New Year skins, you have Christmas skins, Halloween skins, Valentine's Day skins. You've got all of these things that happen naturally.
And then what's going to happen? Well, first, I hate to break it to you, but I can't tell the future. What I will say is I don't think the Grand Theft Auto 6 will cost $100, but I think the Early Access Edition might. And it will probably be, I mean, the most hyped game for at least a lot of people of this entire decade.
Yeah,
so
it's
if
massive.
they do decide to, say, have a $30 more expensive Advanced Access Day 1 edition, yeah, it'll cost $100 for sure.
Yeah,
now,
of course.
if the game ended up having an $80 RRP, right, a $10 increase, that wouldn't really surprise me. Industry-wide, though, would the AAAs like $100? Would they be happy with $80? Yeah, absolutely. But here's the real point and the disingenuous thing that I see. Yes, industry-wide, the AAAs would love $100. They love $80. They love anything that goes up. And in so many cases, the prime argument will be inflation eroding the dollar, so the price has got to go up. And to it,
which is true. They're right.
Yeah, there's a fair argument there.
Yeah.
But it does miss other factors that matter. How much are we paying for their own failures of efficiency, their own cost?
That's the other issue. And I feel like that's the problem that a lot of people have, is that when they see video games that have like these massive HR or, like, I don't want to get into this a lot, but like, these DEI or inclusivity departments, like, how is this... What is this? Why I have to pay $70 for a video game because you want to hire these people for them to feel good about like the way they hire things? Like, what the fuck is this? And so I think it does call into question a lot of the ways that these companies operate and whether it's efficient or not.
controls their own stupid bets on 6-year massive live service titles that cost stupid millions of dollars like Suicide Squad, just as one example. And most importantly of all, how, yes, they may say, well, gamers, back in 2008, if you spent $60 in a game, that's like 87.40 of today's dollars, so you should be paying $90 for a game today. So, do you know what that doesn't really get? I mean, number one...
Well, it's a logical argument, and people usually make decisions on prices that are a little bit more emotional. Like, just because you can logically explain it to somebody doesn't mean that they're just going to give you another $50, right?
About median wages not keeping
That's not
up
how
with
it works.
inflation, but we could also talk about how, you know, back in 2008, when I bought a game, by and large, I bought the whole game, and that was kind of that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, that same amount of money, that $69.99, it's getting you a game, but it's also getting you a gateway to a digital storefront that wants even more money. So yes, inflation has happened, but let's not pretend that that's the only thing that's going on within the game.
Is it a physical game? No, I think distribution costs have gone down, but you also have had them replaced with costs, for example, on Steam. Like, Steam is going to be 20 or 30% probably in order to distribute your game. Well, that's one form of distribution cost.
Being asked to buy. And look, it's fun to short call, it's fun to analyze. The thing I care about at the end of the day, the most, is that we get good games that have got like real value as like bits of art, bits of experience, the sorts of things that leave players better than they found them, not just kind of infinite Skinner box slop games. And more, I think the unit economics of the business are not supporting that. So caring about games as a medium, I do see this as really quite a depressing risk. That being said, there's a AAA company on our radar who are very much planning to make, well, the sorts of games that we would want succeed.
Imagine
they're
that.
Called Remedy, and to understand that story and the context of exploding game budgets, check out this video next.
Yeah, no, I think he's totally right about this. And I feel like what's going to end up happening is that these games are going to continue getting more popular. And that's also another reason why the prices, people think they could go down, because there's a fixed cost of making a video game, right? So like, let's say there's the fixed cost of $100 million, and then there's the variable cost of the sale of the game that is, let's say, $20. So you sell a $70 game. Every single game, you have $50 that's chipping away at that fixed cost, naturally. And so if you have like 10 times more or 5 times more gamers than you did before, if you have that same type of prospective audience, or percentage-based audience, you're going to hit that mark a lot earlier, and you can afford to sell games at a cheaper price because you're selling them to way more people, and you are diluting that fixed cost among way more people. So there's a lot of factors with this, but I do think that video games are going to continue going up in price. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't really see them going down in price, but I think that we'll always see games that are going to be cheap, things like, Vampire Survivors or games similar to that. So you build up momentum, the mountain to chip away at it. Well, yeah, basically that's how it works, exactly. I just don't like how Matt Ball and the other analysts ignore the positive changes and only point to inflation. More games sell today, microtransactions, digital only, so many things working in their favor. Yeah. I mean, I think that probably, like, despite all of that, you're probably going to have a higher cost, especially, like, the $60 to $70 cost, I think, is probably not enough in order to account for inflation based off of how things were in 2005 versus now. But, I don't think it's really that simple either. Good video? Yeah, it was a really good video. I'm going to link it to you guys. You can give it a like. Give me 1 second. I will be right back. And my favorite 4-letter F word is free. Really? Okay, that wasn't what I was expecting. I can see that.